Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz. We're so happy that you're joining us again as we talk about more topics surrounding our Catholic faith. And my name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined always by Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
And the person who has not bought me an advent calendar yet, Matt Van Milligan. Matt, welcome to you.
Oh, with the little chocolates?
The little chocolates.
Do you want the calendar or do you want the chocolates? Because
Well,
we can just...
you're not going to give me a calendar with the doors open already.
You know what I did
might.
see?
I might.
I thought about this one time. I saw it on Pinterest or something. Was an advent calendar, but with all those little bottles of wine or alcohol.
Yes.
Isn't that a kind of a cool idea?
Yes.
It's expensive. I thought about doing it for my wife, and then it just got too expensive. But something I would think about.
Those little booze.
It's like a little booze.
Are they actually booze bottles?
Yeah,
Or
they're
those chocolate.
like a little shot. Like a little shot in each
okay.
one. And sometimes it's just like a little bottle of wine, like one little glass of wine or something. But you could have like one, every night.
You ever see those they're wrapped little booze bottles, but they're actually chocolate, and they have just a little bit of the booze in the middle of the chocolate.
Yeah, like a brandy bean type thing.
Like a brandy bean type, but it's in the shape of a bottle. Yeah, my favorite are Baileys, in case you're wondering.
Okay.
Baileys chocolates. Yeah, please write it down on your list there.
Do you remember we were at, me and Father Daniele were at the store, and as I was walking by, there happened to be some advertisement which always gets my attention for s'mores liqueur. And I was like, s'mores?
Yeah.
That's chocolate, marshmallows. That's a great idea. There's a little bit of disappointment. I mean, not bad. I bought it. We tried some. It was all pretty much just Irish cream again. Like it was just Bailey's again, but in a different name. But it was good.
It had a smoky taste to it.
Yeah, it did have a smoky taste to it.
That's the s'mores taste they were trying to go with.
Yeah.
You know? We should do a whole episode on this.
Yeah, I think we could. Yeah.
Irish creams.
Do it for St. Patrick's Day. Well,
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this past Sunday was the Feast of Christ the King. One of my favorite feasts in the church here. Like really centers us, focuses that Jesus is our King. You know, like that Kanye West song. And but really another reason why is because it's really the end of our church year, right? Like these few days during this week that we're celebrating are like the last part of ordinary time. And then Saturday night, as soon as it turns dark, it begins a new year, right? The first Sunday of Advent, a new liturgical calendar year.
And that's how it works, right? Because that's something actually I remember having to look up a couple of times was, when does Advent start? Advent starts the first Sunday of Advent.
That's right.
That's when it starts. So during the year for Mass, between Christ the King and Advent, it's still the old...
Yeah,
okay,
it's still
the
ordinary
old
time.
Yeah, ordinary time.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's the last few days, like this week right here,
Yeah.
is the last few days of ordinary time.
Yeah, and then Advent. The New Year starts the first Sunday of Advent, and so it's that first week of Advent. Then we start with Sunday.
Would be next week. Yeah, after the first Sunday of Advent would be the first week of Advent.
And then go from there.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So the New Year begins with the first Sunday of Advent. And I know 2020 has been like a weird year, but like it kind of seemed like Advent really came fast. Is that just?
Yeah.
Well, I got to be honest. I was shopping in September and I saw Advent calendars. So
Yeah, Christmas decorations were up early this year.
that was for a whole other reason other than Christmas, but
Yeah.
it's just to get the Christmas profit in, right?
Yeah.
Before things closed.
And last weekend at Mass, I talked about, we should start really preparing our hearts for Advent and really making it a good Advent. And then people were kind of asking me after, well, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah. Or if we're preparing our hearts now, what are we going to do during Advent?
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to talk with you guys today a little bit about what do we do for Advent? When you think of Lent, it's very clear. It's a time of penance. We know we have to go to confession. We know we have to give up something. We know we have to, we know it's 40 days long. And then Advent, people are like, all we know is there's a wreath and it's purple too. Right, but how long is people don't really know the length of Advent, what we're supposed to do, maybe even what the purpose of Advent is.
I think now you can correct me if I'm wrong. What I understand is as long as there's 4 Sundays before December 25th, right? That's what they count. They go, okay, December 25th, go 4, 3, 2. Yeah. This is the first Sunday.
That's
of Advent.
right,
and that's how we go. And then go from there. And there's different meanings for every Sunday, from my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I only ever remember there's 3 purple candles. So there's 2 purple
Yeah.
candles, 1 pink candle, and another
And then
purple
another
candle.
purple.
And the pink candle is always joy. I don't remember any of the other ones. I know I hear about it every year, and we focus on it, and there's prayers on certain themes for every time. And when I'm picking out music, I do try to, like, I read the readings, and then I think about that theme too as well when we're going with the mass music. But joy is the only one I ever remember.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's so easy, because it's so pink and different from the rest of the
That's
candles.
right. That's right.
Yeah, I can't believe you can't remember the themes. Of
I'm sure it's
as I'm looking them
love.
up before.
I'm sure it's love and peace. And
It is. It's hope,
Okay.
peace, joy, and love.
there
Hope,
you go.
peace, joy, and love. And I did have to look that up.
Yeah.
Like, I had to remind myself of the order, when you're not.
which way they go. Okay, so to start off, Advent.
Okay, so
There's
let's
words.
just think of the word Advent.
Yeah.
Like, we use the word Advent as a new beginning, right? The advent of whatever it might be. So it is. It's a new beginning. It's a new beginning of a church calendar year. The word Advent is a Latin word, advenire, which means to come. Like the Lord is coming. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so it's a period really of preparing ourselves for the great feast of Christmas. Just like we prepare ourselves in Lent for Easter, well, we do the same for Christmas. It's a major feast of the church. Everything changed on that day.
Yeah.
God, for the first time and only time in human history, becomes a human being, takes on human flesh. We Christmas is kind of like the word we use all the time, but really what happened was the incarnation. And I always ask my students in class, if they speak Italian, and most of them say no. But the word incarnation, like the word carne in Italian is meat, flesh. The word made flesh, and that's what happens on Christmas. Not that just Jesus was born, but that God became human. He took on humanity, and they're like, oh, okay. Because we focus a lot on Jesus' birthday, but it's much more deeper than that. So what does it mean for us that God took on our humanity? God is now both human and divine on this earth, walking around like we are. What does that mean for us? It takes time for us to really digest that, to really prepare to celebrate that well. Hence, the season of Advent.
Yeah, and it changes the world. If you look at kind of, we probably going to talk a little bit about like the symmetry between Advent and Lent, but also kind of there's an asymmetry there as well, where Advent is the incarnation and Lent is the death and resurrection. That, like, both of these are kind of singularities of history that actually change the underpinning dynamics of existence. That and we talked a little bit, like people know Lent, I think, typically a little bit better because, well, in a lot of ways, I'm thinking about it, because if you think about Advent, it's kind of been elbowed out a little bit by like the commercialized version of Christmas,
exactly.
and that
Advent calendar.
and then Advent is kind of, or like, in a lot of people's understanding, that Advent is kind of tacked on, or like you have the Advent calendar or the wreath, that people still retain the wreath sometimes, like. Over and above the tree, which I think is interesting. But then you also have kind of the commercialization of Easter as well. But I think the marketing forces behind Christmas have maybe been a little bit more successful.
Yes.
But when you're looking at the actual liturgical seasons, that each of them is a season of preparation, a season of anticipation for this event. So in Advent specifically, we're identifying ourselves with all of the people in the Old Testament that were awaiting, anticipating the coming of the Messiah.
That's what I was looking up, actually, when I was looking up on my phone. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says the goal of Advent is to make present to ourselves and our families the ancient expectancy of the Messiah by sharing in the long preparation for the Savior's first coming. Yeah. Like, realizing that we're going back and we are celebrating all the Old Testament, basically, in those 4 weeks, and the longing that they had and the desire that they had, that the whole faith up until that point was built around the Messiah coming soon. Jesus, like, the Messiah was coming to earth. God was going to, save them from their long, treacherous journey of slavery and like this awesome history, but at the same time, horrific history sometimes of what they were,
Fulfilling a promise that's millennia old.
Exactly. Yeah. And so to focus on that, to focus on the Old Testament, or to focus on to put ourselves in the Israelites' shoes, and what they were expecting or what they were living out, and focusing on all the way that it was in the fulfillment now, thousands of years later, and being able to see a fuller picture of what was happening. So when they said the Messiah and how he saved the world, it wasn't a warrior with a shield and a spear and everything else, but some were expecting it. It wasn't a political figure. It wasn't a king in the sense of ruling a kingdom, or Judea as a kingdom, but more as the king above all kings, and how to live our life. So putting it from that light.
Yeah, I really like that connection. And the church does it a lot. It connects us always with each other, our brothers and sisters in faith, but also our brothers and sisters who have gone before us. So to make that connection back to the Old Testament, people who are waiting the Messiah to come. And I also like the point you made, Matt, about how Advent is often elbowed out of the picture because we're just anticipating Christmas. Countdowns to Christmas. Like Advent has become the countdown calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like 20 days before, they cheap out on the calendar, eh? Instead of the actual dates of Advent, it just starts December 1st.
Well, it's because they can print the same calendar for 5 years in advance.
Every year, yeah, exactly, and reuse that stale chocolate. My chocolate better not be stale in the calendar you're getting it.
If it's even there.
The alcohol keeps it fresh. The alcohol keeps it fresh. That's how it works.
It's I didn't agree to get you anything. But yeah, that's a really good point, because that's what Advent has become. Just waiting to the day till we get to open our presents.
You think it stems from, and I don't know this for sure, but my kids right now are already talking about Christmas.
Yeah.
So it's like my son had a birthday back in October, and all of September, the focus was his birthday. So he was excited, and he was excited for the presents he was going to get. Do you think it stems maybe from a little bit of our childhood of we knew Advent was the time when we can start looking at Christmas, we can start thinking about Christmas, and maybe that just kind of sticks with us a little bit. I agree that the commercialization of Christmas and all that stuff, everyone's making us think ahead to Christmas, not to the significance of the day or what we celebrate on Christmas Day, but the buy your presents early kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But there is, to me, there's still anticipation. I don't let my kids start playing Christmas carols in my house until the first Sunday of Advent. And actually, I think I've given in the last couple of years till the day after Christ the King. And then the Monday after the Sunday, I let them now start, okay, you can fine. You can start listening to them.
But that's another good point. It's when do you put up your Christmas tree? When do you put up your Christmas decorations?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, because Advent is often just pushed aside and elbowed out, that's one of the reasons we don't know the richness of that season, because we often just skip it, and sometimes even me, I'm just the weather a couple weeks ago before the snow started coming, it was perfect time to get the lights up or this up or put your decorations outside. And you can't fault people for that, because who wants to put up decorations in snowy weather, right? But there is something really practical and something really meaningful about letting Advent be Advent, really celebrating with anticipation. What does it mean for me that God came to the same earth we're walking on, the same earth that we're living on? We really have to reflect on that, because it changed the world, and it should be changing our world today.
The Jesse tree.
Yeah.
You heard about the Jesse tree. And so one of the things my parents used to use the Jesse tree during Lent. Advent, not Lent. But specifically because the Jesse tree that we use anyways had little Bible scripture verses on it. And then it went for the season of Lent. And so every single day there was a small scripture verse that reflected the coming of Christ. But you went from the book of Genesis all the way through up in the whole Old Testament. But just very significant, maybe a paragraph in each. And so we would read it together as a family, kind of going up. And it was always brought a little focus, and there's always a little picture on the ornament itself that would go on this Jesse tree. And I remember it, there's a ladder for Jacob's ladder, talking about Jacob and talking about Jacob's struggle. There was a bowl of, a Technicolor dream coat for Joseph and whatever, all those little things. And so we would read these stories, and we would focus on the Old Testament all the way up, and how every story did reflect in essence a waiting, which is kind of cool.
That is kind of neat.
So
Now, do you know that during the season of Advent, we're doing a couple things? Okay, I know we're talking about anticipation for the birth when we celebrate the incarnation, but for the first number of weeks of Advent, all of our scriptures that we read during the period of Advent are really reflecting on, Advent, we know it means advenire, the coming of Jesus, right? But in the first weeks of Advent, we're reflecting on the second coming of Jesus, right up until December 17th.
And then
That day is 7 days before Christmas Eve, right? And for the first period of Advent, all our readings and our focus is on the second coming, because we're trying to make the connection here. If Christ has come for the first time, we as Christians really know that he has been here, gives us life, but we're awaiting his second coming. And so all of a sudden, this period of time is to focus on his second coming. What does that mean when Jesus returns? Is it going to happen in our lifetime? Is it going to be after we've passed away? But as Christians, we do believe that Jesus will come again to judge the living and the dead. And so the beginning of Advent is to really reflect on the second coming and what that means, and to put it in perspective of our life. And then after that magic day of December 17th, boom, we start focusing on his first coming, the incarnation, right? So there's a real connection between Jesus has come into this world, and that's not the end of the story. No. It's not like, he came, he lived here, he died, he rose from the dead. That's not the end of the story. There's more to the story. The Christian story continues to go, Jesus is coming again.
Yeah, and the way that we so I said earlier about identifying with kind of the Old Testament in that anticipation, that it's not as though it's just this abstract, removed thing, that all of us are eagerly await, the earth groans in eager anticipation of the coming of that we put on a number of the attitudes, because there's a range of attitudes represented in the Old Testament. You have the Israelites wandering in the desert. There's and there's kind of this kind of joyful anticipation as well, that it's the full kind of range of emotions, that it's not just talking about the kind of asymmetry with Lent that we were saying. Technically, in the Western Church, the days that are identified as penitential are the season of Lent and Fridays throughout the year. That the season of Lent isn't strictly penitential, but in the we've talked a little bit about the Eastern or Byzantine Church, they more formally take on kind of a penitential attitude, and that there is that symmetry with the time frame as well, because they continue.
I love that
past Epiphany, but this was actually only brought to my attention a couple years ago, that you have that 40 days, you have the numerology, you have the significance of the 40 in the Old Testament and throughout 40 days of Lent, that there's a really, really interesting analogy with, and this comes to mind because we just had a baby, pregnancy, 40 weeks of pregnancy. Pregnancy is a season of anticipation, is a season of mild trepidation and uncertainty, also anticipating a great deal of joy. So there's a measure of struggle that these are held in tension, that the coming of Christ means something, that the resurrection means something, and it's a substantial, existential change for the world and ourselves, and that in preparation we should put on these attitudes, and we should really, really understand what's at stake, or what's actually going on in a liturgical sense.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that being said, what can people do practically during Advent to really help that preparation? What are we supposed to do in Advent to really, to celebrate Christmas well? What are some practical things we can do?
The Jesse tree would be one of them. But I really like, the church always hands out, or our church anyways, always hands out the Word Among Us with the little reflections for Advent and stuff. I really got to be honest with you, I really love those. Those always get me back on my prayer time if I'm off. But also just because it takes 5, maybe 10 minutes to read through some of the readings, probably 10 minutes to read through the readings and the reflection. It's like a mini homily, if you will.
Yeah, there's a daily meditation.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's good to get on, for me, to kind of get, and that gets you on track kind of to prepare your heart all the way through. That's one thing. But also just do we do the Advent wreath at home? Do we focus on the Advent wreath? And you can't buy Advent candles almost anywhere now. We tried last year. We tried the year before. Even this year, looking around, trying to see where can I get purple and one pink. You can get a bunch of purple candles, but you can't get that one pink, or you know what I mean. So it's hard to get. I mean, you can get wreaths, but not the Advent wreath necessarily. Right. So. Yeah, but doing the Advent wreath, we used to do it every night. We're talking about starting it up this year. Is lighting it for supper.
So yes, I've seen families have the little wreath on their kitchen table, light the candle. Yeah. And you know, it is nice for the family to start counting down these weeks to Christmas. So yeah, we're talking about daily meditation, putting a wreath in your household, right? Now, as much as we're talking about penitential stuff, like in Lent, we know that, you know, it's very penitential, Fridays in Lent, Fridays during the church year. But in Advent, the church does suggest, you know, I know it says you should go to confession once a year. That's like the bare minimum for those who need the bare minimum to survive. But in Advent, it should be a time, because we're anticipating the major feast of Christmas. So people should go to confession and receive the sacrament of reconciliation during Advent as well. What other things can people do during Advent to really make it, you know, and Advent's such a busy time because people are finishing, like now, I don't know what this Advent's going to look like.
Yeah, I know, it's going to be crazy.
With all the restrictions and things happening. But
here's a reminder for people out there listening. If you're trying to get things in by mail, we're almost too late. You know what I mean? I was looking up some stuff online and trying to get it, and they can promise me it'll be here by January 1st.
Ooh.
So that's kind of...
Are those the Advent candles you were ordering?
Well, I was looking up those too. It's too late for those, but it is like for any kind of Christmas gifts or any of that kind of stuff.
A lot of people
January 1st is when they can guarantee it by. Sometime between December 18th and we might get it before Christmas or we may not.
Wow.
You know, it's already at that time. So
just so you know, I'll take my gift from you after the New Year too.
I can just deliver. I don't have to deliver it.
Yeah. I'll take it in January too. It doesn't matter. So what about, I really like to focus on whoever you're living with at home, whether it's family with children or a spouse or whatever, to pray together during Advent, to start that together. And what does it mean? And maybe even, that's a great way to start the conversation, is what does it mean for us that Jesus came into this world?
Yeah.
You know, like that's something that really happened. You know, what does that mean for people? Okay, if Jesus is so special to you, let's pray together now.
Yeah.
Let's start this tradition of praying to open our heart. If that's what Jesus means to us, let's remind each other each day that because Jesus came, changed the world, every day my life should be different. My life should be changed as well in the way I live, the way I speak, the things I participate in. You know, like he didn't just change the world by entering it. He's changed our lives as well. But we have to remind each other of that.
One of the other traditions we use is Advent angels or Advent buddies, depending on what you call it. But basically, it would be, we play almost like a Kris Kringle Secret Santa type thing, where you pull names and only you get specific people, and then you would do things for them in secret, not letting them know. But like their bed would, so for my boys, they have certain chores or whatever, and so a chore would be done or a bed would be made without so there's a part of it which is fun, which is sneaky, which is trying to get something done, but at the same time is also self-sacrifice by doing someone else's chore for them without being asked, as well as the joy of seeing their face when you've done something for them. But all in secret, no one knows, no one's supposed to know, the only people that know is the parents. And then every time they do something like that, we put a little piece of straw in the manger. So the bed of Jesus is fluffier, you know, for the baby Jesus when the baby Jesus finally gets to the creche. So
that's another good point. The creche.
Yeah.
To set one up, and you know, obviously to leave Jesus and Mary and Joseph out of it for now.
There's a great tradition in your family where they set up the nativity scene in the front yard.
Yeah.
But it's nobody's there until Christmas Eve. The Magi come from the east.
And so my dad has 200 acres.
Yeah.
And so it's about 2 kilometers, I think, of road space. And then so from the east, you see these figures, and they're almost life size. I mean, they don't look life size. I mean, they're 4 or 5 feet tall, but they move along my dad's property to get to the creche, which is in the front yard. And then Mary and Joseph come from the other side with the donkey, and they move along. And so every day or every couple of days, my dad goes out there. And I don't know, respect to my dad, not respect, but my dad does it because my mom loved it before she passed away. That was one of the things she loved having happen, a witness, and people actually would stop by and say, we saw that Mary got moved, and they would go out, and my mom did it every time when she was alive until she got too sick, and then my dad started doing it, and then my mom's passed away 12 years now, and he's continued that tradition. Just kind of, he goes out and he moves it along, and then by Christmas, I think it's the week before Christmas, the last week of Advent, people are starting to get to they're in the yard now, at least with the big stable, and it's all lit up, but it's not until the very end where there is, my dad goes out and lays Jesus in the puts Jesus in the manger out there in there with Mary and Joseph around, and then Santa Claus ends up dropping by, and so in the morning we wake up and Santa Claus is there, and he's kneeling in front of the creche.
Really?
Yeah, there's an actual figurine of Santa Claus kneeling in front of the creche too. That Santa Claus always puts out there, so it's kind of cool.
That is neat.
Yeah.
And it's great evangelization that like a lot of times you'll drive by a nativity that's in front of a church that's just there the whole time, and it just becomes commonplace background. But if those are moving at regular interval, it like cause people to think about like, oh yeah, okay, this happened in stages. We're saying about like just kind of practical things we can do to put on those attitudes to do that preparation. That a big thing I think is daily readings. Like if you're not doing daily readings, if you're not following the missal, that like what a great way to anticipate with the Bible figures, the Magi especially. Like every year these are people who don't know what they're anticipating. They know that there's something significant that they have to go, that they're bringing gifts, that this is a big deal for them, that it's and like picking someone to whether it's in the earlier stages of Advent, like, am I like this person, and like what does the coming of Christ mean for me now? And then when you get into the kind of the Old Testament anticipation, okay, what does it mean for these people to wait for 40 years to have that, like their whole life is kind of bound up in this one expectation that's going to fundamentally change their life.
Yeah, and when we start putting our sort of relationship with God in perspective of these people who waited like long to desire like the Messiah to come and all these things, it reminds us not to take it for granted. Eh? Like we're not like these people in the scriptures who know the fullness of the story. Like, and now that we do, we know Jesus was born. We know he rose from the dead. We know this. Sometimes we take it for granted. But it has to be new all the time, for us.
Yeah, I just thinking about something just kind of came to mind as you guys were talking about that, which was Thomas. Jesus said to Thomas, happy are those who have not seen yet still believe.
Yeah.
I always took that to meaning us like we never saw Christ in human form necessarily. We saw him in the Eucharist and stuff, but always talking about like us who haven't seen him crucified necessarily. But he could have also been talking about the Old Testament
for
people,
sure.
You know what I mean?
For
and
sure.
the people that had that faith that the Messiah was coming and stuff. Just
For
kind
sure,
of mind blown there for a second.
Absolutely. Blessed are those who have not seen yet still believe.
Yeah.
But I think we have to remind ourselves that there were people who hoped for this that never got to see it. And here we are with the full knowledge of what happened with Jesus. And sometimes we're not really living like we should be, knowing all the fullness of the story of Jesus.
I think it's a time of Advent too that you can just kind of take a small portion of it to focus on Mary, because I think in the preparation before is where Mary really shines. She shines throughout the rest of it too, and her words of wisdom and everything else, do whatever he tells you, all that stuff throughout Jesus' life. But she doesn't have a lot to say or be a part of necessarily at the end, other than being at the foot of the cross. And but at that very beginning, she's the first Christian. She's the first person to say yes to Jesus, to take Jesus into her life literally, and be able to say yes and give her life, like knowing quite literally that being pregnant without a husband and stuff was meaning that she was going to be stoned to death, and that she's giving her yes to God in the fullness way. And she gave a yes to martyrdom, which didn't end up being that way, but she gave that yes before, to Jesus, to God. So
Mary is a great companion for your our Advent journey. I think that's very beautiful. I think that's a really good, some reflections for our Advent season, So together with prayer, together with reminding ourselves about the season, doing little practical things at home that we talked about, maybe a little chocolate on the side,
Maybe a little
all
alcohol.
these things. Yeah, maybe a little alcohol too. It all helps us to remember that this season is different. That this is a season of anticipation, of awaiting, and we're waiting for Jesus' coming. Whether for the first little while, second coming, and then closer to Christmas. And I honestly think, even for myself, when I really am conscious of that I'm in Advent, Christmas is so much more joyful for me. And I feel like I've celebrated it well and haven't just like, oh gosh, Christmas is already here. Like, you've anticipated it, you're ready for it, and your heart is open just to celebrate it really well. So I hope that's what we can help our those who are listening to celebrate a good Advent. So thanks, guys, for a good discussion on Advent. It starts this coming Sunday, so happy Advent to both of you. Happy Advent to all of you who are watching. And if you have any questions for us about this episode or any other, or suggestions for future topics, email us at thecatholicbuzzpodcast@gmail.com. And we will see you next time on another episode of The Catholic Buzz. My name is Father Daniele, and for Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milgen, see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.